is December 4th, 2024. I am Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Joining me, as always, my good friends here, Nigel Hannaford, opinion editor of the Western Standard.
Hello again, Eric.
And Western Standard senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan.
Always a pleasure.
Well, fun stuff today. Donald Trump putting out a tweet saying, they better get drug smuggling and borders under control, or he is slapping a big 25% tariff down on goods coming from Canada and Mexico. And very quickly, Justin Trudeau hopped on a plane, heads down to Mar-a-Lago for a little chit-chat there, kissing in the ring. We're going to be talking about that. But then, we're going to be even more interesting, or at least more fun. In our second segment, we're going to, Donald Trump suggested, jokingly, I think, that, if Canada couldn't take the tariffs or comply with his conditions, that maybe Canada should just join the United States, become the 51st state. So we're going to have a very serious conversation on if Canada should annex the United States of America. And third, I've sometimes thought that Austria should annex Germany. Yeah,
been tried.
That under the Holy Roman Empire actually more or less did. And then we're going to talk about the possibility of an early election. There's been some developments. I increasingly think there's a very good chance we're not going to have to wait till October of next year. We might finally be able to put a bullet in old Yeller here and move on with our lives, get a government in place that can, actually pass a single bill through Parliament. Okay, well, let's start off with it. As I said right at the top, Trump is. I've never seen a president make so many waves in the lame duck period in between the election of a new president and before they're sworn in. Normally, it's pretty quiet. It's behind the scenes. There's noise around cabinet picks, although not this much noise around cabinet picks. But he is conducting foreign policy at this point. He has issued notice to Hamas that unless all of the surviving hostages are released by the time he's sworn in on January 20th, there's going to be hell to pay. And there's some indications that Hamas, whatever's left of their leadership at least, is taking that seriously. Slightly less grave, but pretty serious still, is the threats he's issued against Canada and the United States, not to lump us in with Hamas, although you could be forgiven for thinking, looking down the streets of many Canadian major cities, was the threat that unless we get the border under control, stop the flow of drugs in the United States, that he's going to slap a 24% tariff on Canada and Mexico. Now, Nigel, I think Mexico is generally understood, and I think rightfully understood, to be the major irritant in the North American relationship, less so Canada. But there are major irritants. It was not said in his tweet, but I think it's been understood from many American officials related to the incoming administration. The defense is also probably a part of this conversation. But a 25% tariff, I mean, this is Trump. A lot of people who don't know, it takes a while to understand Trump, and you have to understand the difference between lying and bullshitting. He lies sometimes. He's a politician, but he bullshits a lot. And there can often be truth in bullshitting. I take this as probably just, it's a very bold opening move. I'd be shocked if at the end of the day there was ever a 25% tariff against Canada.
I would be shocked indeed, but, the shameful thing in all of this is that it takes a president-elect of the United States to point out what our prime minister is failing at. I mean, we know that. We know they've had a very lax immigration policy, which has allowed some bad people to get into the country, and some of them try to slip over the border. Well, we shouldn't be letting that go on. The drug thing, gosh, if there's a war on drugs, we're losing it. But everybody's in the same boat with that. So while I take it seriously, I don't think that's the major irritant at all. But it is a terrible thing that the justification for applying a tariff on Canada is you're not doing your job on border control. That's the first job that the government of Canada has. And it's taking a US president to point that out. It's just an awful situation. So anyway, Mr. Trudeau goes down there and gets his marching orders from over a good dinner, I'm sure. Very likely, I don't know this for a fact, but very likely all at Mr. Trump's expense. He's not yet the president of the United States. He's not putting in his chit. He doesn't even take a salary. It would be very much in the style of the man to have people come in and he feeds them at his estate from his own resources, and then they go back and do what they're told.
I expect that is happening, but during the transition, there is a budget for the incoming presidents. They have significant resources at their disposal. They're treated in very many ways like the president, just without the White House and the nuclear codes at that point. But yeah, I take your point. Cory, there is no real way to control the Canada-US border. Even a wall would not do it. It's just so utterly massive. I know you posted a picture on your Twitter a couple of days ago. You know, when you were a landman,
Surveyor.
You're a surveyor. I've been out down in that area along the U.S. border. I've even driven down Border Road back in the days where if you're on the road, you're in America. If you're on the north side ditch, you're in Canada. I technically snuck into America. There is no real controlling the border. So I don't think it's fair to say Canada or even Justin Trudeau is responsible for really what's going back and forth between that border. It's just too big and porous. It's the largest undefended border in the world and in the history of the world, as far as I know. But what we do control, and that is much more important and entirely in our ability to control very easily if we had any determination, is the external North American border, what's coming into Canada. Because what comes into Canada can very easily get into the United States. And I think that is the single biggest trade and foreign policy goal of really any Canadian government in the post-war era, is to keep the Canadian-American border as flexible and open as possible. That is an area where we do want an open border. It is our maritime and airspace borders that have become porous under Justin Trudeau. And I don't think Trudeau seemed to grasp that. I don't think Trump is viewing the Canada-US border the way he views the US-Mexican border, where people are hopping over and they don't necessarily want that border open. But I think he's referring probably to Canada's aeronautical and maritime borders.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, I've worked down there. We don't have the resources to control that border, even if we wanted to.
No country in the world does.
And I don't think there's really that much actually crossing, though it's easily enough done if somebody with a bit of planning, as I kind of said. People think that there's a lot going on down there. No, it's a broken down barbed wire fence with houses miles and miles apart at best. And even the Americans have limited resources to watch it. But the issue is, we've had unchecked, uncontrolled immigration. We haven't deported people we have found to be bad characters. We have a backlog of over 1 million people in the immigration system right now in processing. I mean, many of them are legitimate people that just want to come here and make their lives, but this is how badly we've been doing it. It takes years to process this, and then once we process it, we find out, oh, we got to deport this guy. Great. Well, we lost track of him 2 years ago. Who knows where he is? And chances are these people are showing up in the United States. Mm-hmm. So that's where we have to get ourselves under control. As well, I had Sam Cooper on as a guest. He was fantastic. He talked about that. We've become a hub for money laundering in Vancouver for Chinese drug cartels and Mexican drug cartels. And we're finding some very large, again, Mexico is certainly far more of a drug problem than Canada, but we're finding big labs up here. Trump wanted to get Trudeau's attention, and he certainly did. Even if the tariffs aren't something that he's really going to oppose, talk about a power play. He threw that out just on X. You got the leader of a country within a couple of days' notice to come down, have dinner at your place, where you basically belittled him and sent him home without much change. He's establishing the relationship that they're going to have right now, and he's on top.
Well, let's talk about that. I have to admit, okay, the knee-jerk reaction, not just of conservatives, but I think a clear majority of Canadians at this point, is to loathe anything that Justin Trudeau does. He looks weak because he is weak, and he was in a position of weakness there. But I think he did what any Canadian Prime Minister had to do in that circumstance. This is an existential threat to Canada at this point. A 25% tariff would throw us back in the dark ages economically. It would hurt America, but it'd kill Canada. He could bring us to our knees. So there really isn't much more of an important file right now than keeping trade with the United States open. So he had to go down, but it certainly looked weak. But frankly, I think Pierre Poilievre would have had to do the same thing if he was in the case. Stephen Harper would have to do the same thing in that case. But I don't think Trump probably enjoyed the theater of him having to come down and kiss the ring and plead and beg. But he doesn't seem to have any appetite to negotiate with the man because he knows Trudeau can't really negotiate. It's like, if there's a hostage negotiation and they just said Bob in, the hostage negotiator, but he doesn't even have any power to get anything from his bosses. The guy holding the hostages at the bank doesn't really want to talk to you if the hostage negotiator can't deliver anything. He can't deliver the helicopter or whatever his demands are. Trump knows that this guy is gone. He has no negotiating power. Trudeau can't even pass a bill through Parliament at this point. Parliament is deadlocked because the Liberals refused to comply with an order of Parliament to disclose documents on corruption in the Green Slush Fund. And Trump knows this. And I get the feeling that whatever remains of Liberal Canada at this point, in the headquarters of the Toronto Star and CBC, they don't. It might starting to be finally dawn on them that they have newspapers in Mar-a-Lago, and Trump knows that Trudeau's gone, that there's no point in really talking to him. I think he's going to wait out Trudeau at this point. He'll probably impose the tariffs when he is sworn in. I'm not sure if it'll be 25% right out of the gate. Someone rational will probably tell him that it'll get up to 25, but it'll escalate over time unless negotiations, bear some fruit. But I think Trump is just going to wait Trudeau out.
My suspicion is that he'll impose the tariffs on day one and suspend their application pending further talks with the government of Canada. I actually don't think that this would be the case had it been Harper or maybe Mr. Poilievre, because the situation that provoked it would not have been allowed to develop this far.
No, but if the announcement was made, they would have to go.
Well, they would obviously have to talk about it, but it wouldn't have been. My expectation is it would have been a telephone call first, and the whole thing would have looked much more orderly and not a rush to try and save the ship. That was theater deliberately intended to make Mr. Trudeau look small, and then of course, you had that great video that he tweeted out, with him standing on a mountain and a Canadian flag.
Well, we're going to get to that.
That's a different video. There's another one that the one that he tweeted out yesterday.
That's also related to our next segment.
Yeah. All right. Well,
yeah.
You might want to clip that out then. But,
well, no, it's okay.
In any case, there was definite theater there in doing it to Trudeau because Trudeau had done it to him.
Mm-hmm. Cory, I so much of this, again, I guess I kind of get into the power play of what we're going to get into in a moment, but there is a personal loathing of Trump towards Trudeau. Trudeau thought, like many people, that Trump was gone and he's never coming back, and he makes a good punching bag politically, and he could constantly, point to Poilievre and say Poilievre is what they call a maple syrup mega. It was, they would try a few things like that, hoping, the pun intended, that it would stick. It didn't really seem to, but he can't now. The Liberals were hoping for the Trump bump. If Trump wins, then they can stand up for Canada against Trump, and they're going to look good, and that's going to be what saves them. They can't beat up on Trump right now because he holds all the cards. He just had Trudeau walk in like he was, being called into the principal's office. The man's not even sworn in. Yet, Trudeau's the one who asked for the meeting. And Trudeau comes all the way down to Mar-a-Lago to, it was a bit humiliating. But I think how much of this is just also animated by Trump wanting his pound of flesh from Trudeau, because Trudeau, when Trump and Trudeau were first together, this is 2015, 2016, both were fresh. Trudeau was new. He was still broadly popular in Canada at the time. It was because it was 2015. Trudeau is now a global avatar of woke progressivism run amok. He's an embarrassment even to the international left at this point. And I think Trump is kicking him around as almost a global symbol of how he's going to operate, and domestically that what he can do to Trudeau, because it's going to make him more popular at home, because Trudeau is detested broadly across the United States at this point.
Oh yeah, he completely reversed the dynamic of what the Andrew Coynes and the others were seeing was going to happen, was that Trump was going to provide this perfect foil for Trudeau to say, you need me to defend you from Trump. And as you said, no, Trump has turned this around and said, I'm the person to snuff out this woke sort of Sunny Ways, vacuous sort of leadership that everybody's sick and tired of, and watch him dance to my song here as I jump into power. So it went completely the other way around from how some people expected it to go. And yes, Trump is he's a vindictive man, and he's got a long memory. And Trudeau spent a lot of time antagonizing him. I mean, he was, again, tittering at a G8 or NATO meeting, I think it was.
It was NATO.
Where he was, whispering to Macron and other leaders, gossiping. Like, Trump hasn't forgotten that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think it's one of Trump's better traits that he is kind of petty and holds these grudges, but it's a reality of his. And
actually, I would take slight exception there on Mr. Trump's behalf. Half the people that he's nominated for his cabinet are people that he's going head to head with, and
even his vice president, actually,
vice president's choice, So I mean, if it's in his advantage, he's quite prepared to live and let live. But there's something kind of sneaky about what Trudeau did there at that meeting you referred to. Kind of snickering behind their hands, and it got out. Well,
yeah,
bad move.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll move the conversation along to where we all want to get it here. So during this meeting between Trump, Trudeau, and a few others at Mar-a-Lago, Trump apparently joked, and some sources saying Trump has joked about this previously with Trudeau. It's taken as a joke, but Trump, along the lines of everybody already knows the story, but Trudeau says the 25% tariff will be devastating to our economy, and Trump says, well, if you can't survive ripping us off with the trade deficit, perhaps I should just let Canada become the 51st state, and you can be the governor. And Trudeau says something along the lines of, well, it'd be a pretty liberal blue state if it did. And he says, fine, we'll divide it up into one blue state, one red state. I guess he's assuming that, maybe in Alberta and Saskatchewan, we get to be our own state.
At last.
Yeah. The whole thing was a joke, but word of this got out, and it just blew up the internet, not just in Canada, which was predictable, but even internationally. And then Trump riffing on this. You were talking about that picture he posted to Truth Social and then onto X. At that point, he's just trolling Trudeau. He is trolling Trudeau, trolling him. Also for his supporters, it's just he likes fun. He's bullshitting. Again, back to Trump as the bullshitter in chief. I forget who it was that coined that term, but I'm adopting it. And it just became kind of funny. Let's play that. Someone did an AI video. Just this video is AI. It's getting pretty damn good. So I just want to specify that before. Let's just play a little video, a fake video of AI video of Trump, but that just kind of captures the zeitgeist of the moment.
People of Canada, the Great White North, as they call it, except it's not so great anymore, is it? I call it the Great Sad North because that's what it is, sad. On January 20th, I will be slapping huge tariffs on all products coming from your country. The economic consequences will be devastating, but they don't have to be. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was just with me at Mar-a-Lago, and I suggested that I would make Canada the 51st state. It's called Manifest Destiny, and it's happening whether you hosers like it or not. You should have never let us get Alaska. That was your first mistake. Makes no sense that you have to drive through Canada to get to America. Not any longer. There are a lot of great benefits to joining America. We have a great military, the greatest in the world. You'll be able to move from those awful cold shitholes you live in to warm shitholes. Quebec will no longer be a thing. You don't like it, you can all move to France. All Tim Hortons will now become Dunkin' Donuts. Curling will be banned. It's a ridiculous sport, if you can even call it that. As for your precious ice hockey, this will be the hardest part to deal with. But who said there wouldn't be growing pains? The American and Canadian national teams will merge. Say goodbye to your silly little leaf. Say hello to stars and stripes and bald eagles. Also for all those celebrities that moved to Canada because I one sucks to be you.
So this all raises the very important question: should Canada let America join us?
Or, as you put it, annex. Should we
Annex America?
America?
I'm not saying we'd conquer them by force, but Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland say Canada is a convening power. We're great at convening. So why don't we just convene a meeting and America can join Canada?
Well, there are some issues remaining from 1776 that have yet to be satisfactorily resolved to the benefit of the British Crown.
I'm not very happy with the Alaska-BC border.
Well,
The British Empire sold us up the river on that one.
sure that we. I kind of like the idea of Alaska being a little bit different from the rest of the.
Yeah, I'm saying, but the border adjustment was very unfavorable to Canada. It helped provoke the Charlottetown Conference, creating confederation.
There were some other things going on then.
Indeed.
You know, the interesting thing about that is a tangent, but John A. Macdonald probably was in a world scale of statesman, was up there with Bismarck and Disraeli and Gladstone. Anyway, be that, well, that's all ancient history. But if we're going to go back into ancient history, sure, 13 colonies. Let's have the other 37 back in the fold. We can forgive and forget.
Yeah. No, Corey, names aren't coming to mind immediately. No, most people have taken this as a joke. It's funny. Even Trump critics mostly get it's a joke. But I have seen a few nutters on both sides of the border still light their hair on fire. To the credit of the left, they haven't uniformly lit their hair on fire on this one. No, I think some of them are finally understanding that Trump does bullshit sometimes, and he's joking.
Well, yeah, I mean, on a much smaller scale, but on X, I like to lob things out there and get the wobs all squirrely and stirred up too.
Sure.
And you know, if they don't react, it's not any fun. And wiser people realize that, yes, this man is trolling you. He's getting a kick out of this. And if you dive into that pool with him, he's just going to laugh while you let the vein in the side of your head pulse. Though there's still an undertone of serious business about this. These are leaders of two sovereign nations, and it's joking at the meal, but that's not a typical joke between world leaders. When you're discussing national sovereignty between your nations, that's not usual small talk over the appetizers. This is, again, nobody's seriously considering annexing either side going on, but just the fact that leaders are even having this kind of joking, it's just we're building a really bizarre relationship between our countries right now, or at least between Trump and Trudeau. Let's hope that our countries have a better relationship once that leadership changes.
Something that occurred to me, though, that was serious in this is just how utterly powerless and at the mercy of America we truly are. That, well, I don't believe Trump has any ambition to annex Canada, and I wouldn't imagine any significant whatsoever segment of the American population has ambitions of manifest destiny to annex Canada. If they wanted to, they probably could. They could force us to our they wouldn't need to fire a shot. I mean, if the United States just decided to close its border to us, we'd just be cold Mexico. They could kill us economically and force us to do anything they wanted. They could make us do. And it just, this whole thing, as much as it was a joke, it just really brought that home that we just don't have the chips to play.
Don't want to make this a serious conversation because we did head it, let's annex America. However, to your point about making Canada do whatever they needed to do, this started in 1942. That is when the Prime Minister of the time, the late and unlamented Mackenzie King, gave the United States permission to do whatever it felt it needed to do on Canadian territory in order to further the war effort. And one of the first things they did was build the Alaska Highway from Dawson Creek to Fairbanks, Alaska, 1,512 miles of dirt road, which had a strategic objective
an incredible amount of time.
And they did it in 10 months. So the point of that is that right there, they effectively exercised sovereignty over Canadian territory because we had nothing to do with it. Then, in the 50s, we began setting up these early warning lines of radar stations.
Dew line.
The Dew line, and there are others. There's the Spruce line, and there's a number of them. But again, these were all camouflaged with the idea, well, this is a NORAD installation. Yeah, it was an American initiative. It was built by the Americans, paid for by the Americans, and administered by the Americans on Canadian territory. So actually, Derek, we're already there.
I think we have been for a long time. I just don't think Canadians have been very honest with themselves about this. I mean, when John Turner was screaming that free trade would destroy Canadian sovereignty, it was already long gone. The United States is a happy neighbor. They generally they're good neighbors most of the time. And I'd rather have the United States as a neighbor than really anyone else I could think of. But
just
they hold all the cards.
Of what we've turned ourselves into. I'm glad you brought up, yes, the unlamented Mackenzie King and bringing up the brilliance of Sir John A. Macdonald, because the attitude in Canada right now is that we're self-defeating. We're taking away John A. Macdonald's statues. We're a post-national state. We don't have a sense of pride or dignity or standing up for ourselves. Well, yes, but I mean, nationally, it's weak right now, yes. and very much so. And this has been going on for a long, long time. It's really coming to a head now. And Trump has just seen it and exposing it and is taking advantage of it. But this is something been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I suppose to take it further, if we're talking about Canada as a post-national state and, the whole Trudeaupian view of Canada as this, sinful colonial being, well, really, what is the point of maintaining Canada in and of itself? If Trudeau is correct, then why not? Arguably, Canada would have a lot more influence. We'd probably be a pretty big... Canada would not go in as a single 51st state. In the very hypothetical, it's purely hypothetical. But if we're going to play this game, it wouldn't be one big giant, because it would be bigger. It would be a single state, bigger in population than any other state in the United States, and would be bigger in size than the rest of it. So, Canada would probably go in, maybe not as 10 states.
I don't think Quebec would make a good combined state.
No, and I don't think Prince Edward Island gets to be its own thing anymore. Probably the Atlantics get together. There'd be some reconfiguration, but it'd be mostly blue states. The Democrats would benefit tremendously from it. They'd have permanent Senate control, and maybe Alberta and Saskatchewan every once in a while flip red. The Democrats more than anyone would like Canada in. It actually wouldn't be the Republicans wanting it. So I don't know. Liberal Canadians are always fantasizing about being Democrats. They want to be the Democrats so bad. They could finally be Democrats, and it would, at least for some time, until whatever that country is recalibrates itself, and actually be fairly blue. So I don't know. It's a silly argument, almost as silly as Canada annexing the United States. But I think there's a lesson just to remind us here about how weak in this relationship we are and how lightly we have to tread.
Just to the point about the post-national state, the United States has just had a great awakening with this last election. You'll notice how the Democrats haven't challenged it. It was so obvious that the people had spoken. I actually think that there is a Canadian nationalism coming back after the next federal election, because the Liberals are not going to win it, and there's going to be no more talk about a post-national state.
True, but I mean, like military traditions, national traditions, they can be torn down fast, but they take generations to build. And, we've had at least one generation to come up now under Trudeau. A generation's come up under Trudeau. And Canadian nationalism, patriotism has been weakening, I think, for quite some time already. You probably go all the way back to getting rid of the Red Ensign and things like that. You can go back quite a ways if you want. I don't think even a 3-majority term Poilievre government restores this.
They'd have to want to. That's the first thing.
It would have to be an explicit goal of them, but also that always massively upsets the Quebec nationalists. These goals are at loggerheads, and Quebec nationalism rearing. I mean, this conversation is meandering a bit now, but I like this meandering conversation. The PQ is poised to very possibly return to power in Quebec. Promise of a third referendum. There's going to be a lot of hesitancy to poke that bear by really ratcheting up Canadian nationalism. That always really angers even moderate Quebec nationalists.
Well, Canadian unity's never been something I've promoted all that hard over my political years. So,
No, it has not.
Is it? Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, the tea leaves are changing a bit. Justin Trudeau is desperate to hang on to power to the absolute end in October 2025. They're just praying for something to change. They thought Trump's election would change them around. That has obviously not worked to their advantage. It actually may be working very much to their disadvantage. The big thing that's been, as much as they might deny it, Jagmeet Singh's pension and the pension of a significant number of his MPs and MPs in the Liberal caucus don't vest until a week after the next election is scheduled. And that's really been, as much as they deny it, I think it's been one of the driving forces for their desperation to not have an election until that's done. Now, just the other day, Calgary entrepreneur and friend of the Western Standard, Keith Wilson, publicly offered Jagmeet Singh on X that he was going to put together some private financing for him to take care of his pension if he would just allow for an election. I meant Brett Wilson. Did I say Keith Wilson?
Keith's
Keith
a
Wilson
lawyer.
is another
Yeah.
friend of the Western Standard.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, both good guys. Sorry, Brett Wilson is going to put together private financing saying, don't worry about it, Jagmeet, we'll take care of your pension. Just call the damn election. We'll take care of your, we'll buy your next Maserati or whatever it is. Nigel, why don't you elaborate a bit?
Well, there's a bunch of things that make me think we're heading for an early election, and this business of the pensions is just one of them, because that was obviously going to be a lead weight around somebody's neck if they waited it out till October. I think just about every Canadian now realizes that certain people's pensions, and there were probably about 80 of the.
We have to exclude the Conservatives there because none of them are losing the
None of them are
election.
losing,
They're going to
yeah.
get their pensions no matter what, so they're fine with an early election.
Well, of course they are, but they're just in the interest of being accurate.
Mhm.
There are about 80 MPs who stand to get a pension vested a week after the scheduled election date. So this exposes the 50 or so of them who are Liberal or NDP to the charge of hypocrisy, which is an awkward one. If you can get rid of it before you go into an election, do so. The fact that they're prepared to toss it overboard now suggests to me that they may be thinking that an election is coming sooner rather than in October. The second thing is,
So elaborate on what's changing with pensions here.
You have to serve 6 years in Parliament to get a parliamentary pension.
Yeah.
So that means you've got to get elected.
You're talking
the
about,
second time
yeah, the Liberals were proposing to move the election date back a week, which is that week they needed to get
so
their
that these
pension.
pensions
They dropped it now.
So they
Yes.
dropped it because that people were just getting the idea that that was a racket.
Where would they get that idea?
And it would be another reason not to vote for the Liberals or the NDP. So by shedding that bit of baggage, they are a little better prepared for an election when it comes, and it could come early. The fact that no business is being done in the House of Commons is actually starting to take root in the public generally. I mean, for a while, parliamentary procedure it's over most people's heads. It's over most people's level of interests. But the narrative has now taken a hold that there's something funny in something called a green slush fund. And the Liberals have been told to produce the numbers, but they won't. And therefore, the NDP and the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois won't do any other business. And really, if there is something funny, we'd like to see the numbers. And when that's just a Well, that's just the political columnists who understand it. That's one level. When people stop you coming out of church and say, "Hey, you know about this sort of stuff," well, it's actually, can they not do business? And the answer is no, they can't, except as they did a week ago when they passed that GST holiday for Canadians, in which the NDP managed to make themselves look like the saviors of the ordinary people, and 10 cents off a packet of chips at Christmas time. But nothing else of consequence is being done, some of which is a good thing.
I'm generally glad nothing gets done.
By and large, I mean, there's some nasty bills there that they're not getting done. But people will not put up with that indefinitely. And eventually the pressure is going to be on the people sitting in the seats. If you're not going to do your job, let's have the election. And that, I think, is the biggest one. Anyway, people are also starting to get sick of the idea that the NDP say they have no confidence in the government, but they keep voting for them.
Well, that's what I want to ask Cory. Cory, the Conservatives put forward a very clever non-confidence motion here. Jagmeet Singh stands up every day. He gets out of his Maserati on Parliament Hill. He's, and he goes in and says, "I'm for the working man, not like Trudeau and Polyev." What he calls a billionaire bootlicker or something. He calls Polyev. He's doing a really poor imitation of Trump's ability to give nicknames to his opponents. I just don't think it's working.
No.
He doesn't have that je ne sais quoi. But he condemns Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau's so bad, and then he votes with Justin Trudeau that same day, just in the afternoon. Condemns him in the morning, votes with him in the afternoon, keeps him in power. He is the man keeping Justin Trudeau in power. Polyev took a short statement from Jagmeet Singh, word for word, I think, down to the commas, and said, Justin Trudeau's a bad guy for blah, 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 blah. Therefore, the House has no confidence in this government. With Jagmeet Singh's own words. And then Jagmeet Singh had to eat it. And says, "I'm not falling for that trick." What trick? You're not voting to support your words in the House of Commons, or you have power. At some point, the embarrassment's at some point going to get too much for Jagmeet, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, speaking of politically weak relationships, let's go down another level. And the Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh relationship, where Singh is bluster, but he's broke. The party, as people have pointed out, the Maserati Singh drives is worth more than what the entire bank account of the NDP is. He can't go to an election. He will be obliterated if the polls go. So, it must be frustrating for Trudeau to have his ally speaking so much against him, but he also knows that he's not going to take him down. He can't do it. So, yeah, Pierre Poilievre's taking advantage of that and twisting the knife on Singh as well as Trudeau. I think an election's coming this spring. We're seeing the signs coming. The Trudeau government needs a Hail Mary. They're desperate. They're on the ropes. Do you want to run the clock right out to the end, or maybe at least go down on an election budget on a date of your own choosing, trying hopefully to set the theme of the election and what it might be in spring, and let's just throw it to the wind and see what happens, because there's nothing otherwise. It does show pure desperation to run it right to the bitter end and go when you have no choice but when that clock's ticked to the end of it. So I think from the timing of those checks coming out in April to the dropping of the opportunistic move of the election date, and as Nigel says, it's all signaling they're getting ready to pull the plug this spring. We're going to be in for.
Watch when they start putting a lot of money into party advertising.
Yes.
And it also raises the question. Trudeau might just decide to pull the plug himself at this point, which would deny Jagmeet Singh the ability to finally symbolically even vote against
and I think he would, and that's what I'm talking about. He won't be torn down by the other parties. It'll be him saying, this budget is so darned important to Canadians. In fact, we're not going to put it through. We're going to go to the polls with it.
Yeah, you pull a Jim Prentice where you table the budget, call the election.
Exactly.
As well as it worked for Jim Prentice.
It's better than going down looking like you had a gun to your head.
Yeah, and it the Liberals need those NDP votes. When you say, hey, you got to vote for us, because if you don't, Conservatives win, vote splitting, that kind of thing. He might be smart to deny Jagmeet Singh voting against him even once. Because right now, I think Poilievre spends as much time blasting Jagmeet Singh as he does Justin Trudeau, sometimes even more at this point. But Nigel, do you think at some point the embarrassment just gets too much for this guy? Because he has swallowed a lot of shisa. I'm ripping up the agreement. And you ask then the media would ask, so does this mean you're going to vote against Trudeau? Well, I ripped it up. And it's palpable. It's face-palming, embarrassing watching this man at this point. He's already swallowed his dignity, but at some point he's got to salvage something for himself. At some point, do you think Jagmeet Singh finally snaps? Or do you think it's more likely that in the spring, Trudeau does it for him, calls the election himself?
Maybe it won't be Jagmeet Singh that he's responding to. Maybe it'll be Melanie Joly. New York Times had an interview with her while they were all down there in Mar-a-Lago, and produced this wonderful spread on which she declared her loyalty fiercely to Mr. Trudeau, and they headlined it, "This could be Trudeau's successor in Canada, Melanie Joly."
I think at this point, it's past the time where the Liberals can change leaders. I think they're going in with Trudeau.
I think you're probably right, but it was a fascinating diversion of thought.
Yeah.
No, he's got more ego than anybody else I've ever known or heard of, and he has a blindness to the obvious. Don't forget, this is I better be careful with the metaphor here, but this is the bunker mentality, where the only information you've got coming in is what your friends are giving you. And he may well still think that he can tough this out until October. It's going to take no confidence vote to bring him down.
All right. Well, we'll put a pin in that there and go to our parting shots. Let's start with you, Corey.
Sure. Well, speaking of, again, just bad policy, desperation, things coming this morning on the X account from Prime Minister Trudeau, whoever the communications person is that writes it, because the spelling's too good for it to be him. But it said, we're going to crack down. We're going to give cities the power to crack down on short-term rentals through Airbnb and VRBO. What are you getting at? Like, for the housing crisis, for one, what resources are you going to give cities? They don't need money then to crack down on these things. As well, are you going to make a law to make it illegal to utilize your private property as you please? But this is just, again, just showing the stuff that he's just throwing against the wall, hoping that it sticks. And it's just another shallow, foolish, economically illiterate thing coming from this Prime Minister's office.
He also has no idea that municipalities are literally creations of the provinces. He can do nothing with any municipality that a provincial government stands in the way of, including Alberta now, which has legislation to that effect. Nigel.
So here are three things that the Trudeau Liberals don't want to talk about. The deficit numbers for last year should have been out back 3 months ago, but they're sitting on them. I've heard the Conservatives ask for them in Parliament. Parliamentary budget officer says they missed by 6.8 billion. They won't tell us for sure. They're defying a parliamentary order. We've talked about this, to release the numbers on the Green Slush Fund. And they won't even tell you how many people killed themselves medically last year. Normally the MAID numbers are out in July. They're still not out for 2023. So they're hiding that. They're embarrassed about it. And I just cannot think of this has got to do with the timing of an election.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to, I should have this up and ready. But, we were just talking about, Trump's talk around annexing Canada, 51st state stuff. Well, I want to draw the attention to a tweet from Jean Charest. Some people remember him, former PC leader, Premier of Quebec.
He came into the studio a couple times.
Yes, he did. Pleasant enough guy, but, not my cup of tea. But he echoed something. We're going to put the tweet up on the screen here. Trump trolling Canada, put that big picture of him with a Canadian flag up and said, "Oh, Canada." Jean Charest responded with a piece of what I call an urban legend of Canada, that during the War of 1812, when the United States and the British Empire went to war, Canada gloriously marched down to Washington and burned the White House. This, I'm sorry to tell everyone watching or listening at home or in your car who believes this, but this never happened. It didn't even come close to happening. What happened was, so Canadian colonial militia fought in some small battles at Lundy's Lane, Queenston Heights, places like this, mostly in Upper Canada, which we call Ontario today, and a little bit, I believe, in Lower Canada, which we call Quebec. Canadian colonial militia and Indigenous warriors did fight there, almost exclusively on Canadian soil, but also in Detroit, which was which Canadian militia supported some British regulars in. But the White House did get burned down, but it was burned down by British Royal Marines. These were professional soldiers stationed on British warships that sailed up the Chesapeake and landed and took Washington, burning down the White House. The White House was burned in the War of 1812, but there was no one there, as far as I know, in that battle who had even ever visited Canada once in their life. Maybe some of them had been stationed there for a few months or something, but as far as we know, no one even stationed in Canada was in the Battle of Washington, burning down the White House. Canadians had absolutely nothing to do with it. Canadians had about as much to do with it as we did in storming Okinawa. Yes, someone on the same side of a war as us did something, but that did not mean we did it. And so Jean Charest, I think, probably does know better, but playing into this. So just a small little history lesson for folks to correct this urban myth.
You bet.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining. It was a good show. Thank all of you for joining as well. Remember, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you should be supporting us. The Western Standard is one of less than 5 serious independent media left in Canada that refuses to take Justin Trudeau's federal media bailout subsidy. Go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited access, and you get past that pesky paywall. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you very much for joining us today, and God bless.